In a significant shift in policy that echoes the tumultuous and often contentious relationship between the United States and China, President Donald Trump is intensifying his administration's crackdown on Chinese investments and technology access. This latest move, which aligns with the broader trend of economic decoupling from Beijing, indicates a potentially volatile period ahead for both nations as well as for global trade dynamics. Since taking office, Trump has taken a hardline stance on China, primarily focusing on tariffs as a tool of economic negotiation. Recently, however, the administration has broadened its scope, proposing more extensive restrictions on investments between the U.S. and China. This includes appointing officials expected to advocate for stricter controls on Chinese investments and technology sales. Trump has already implemented a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports, labeling it an opening salvo in what could be a protracted economic confrontation. Samm Sacks, a senior fellow at Yale Law School's Paul Tsai China Center, noted that the recent investment memorandum issued by the administration signals a serious intent to fully unwind commercial ties with China. So far, pragmatists have prevailed in getting a more narrow version of decoupling, Sacks remarked, suggesting that while some within the administration advocate for a more aggressive approach, others are still seeking a middle ground. Trump's relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping remains an unpredictable variable in this equation. While expressing a desire for a constructive relationship, Trump also appears willing to leverage economic pressure to extract concessions from Beijing. For instance, in a recent Oval Office address, he emphasized the importance of Chinese investment in the U.S. economy while simultaneously asserting that China should not take advantage of us. This complex dynamic is further complicated by Trump's ongoing negotiations regarding other foreign investments, including proposals from Japan's Nippon Steel and TikTok. His administration's earlier plans to impose severe restrictions on Chinese telecom giant ZTE were abandoned following diplomatic engagements with Xi, highlighting Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. Critics of the administration's current trajectory warned that the escalating tensions could lead to increased trade confrontations. Following Trump's latest tariff measures, China responded with its own set of tariffs on American imports, as well as restrictions on the export of critical minerals and an anti-monopoly investigation into Google. The narrative of competition is poised to intensify, especially as the administration has initiated investigations into the practices of Chinese companies operating in the U.S. Moreover, Trump's recent policies extend to tightening export controls on technology shared with China, with discussions underway to close perceived loopholes in regulations governing chip manufacturing. This follows consultations with allies such as Japan and the Netherlands aimed at preventing technological collaboration with China. The implications of these developments extend beyond mere economic considerations. As the administration seeks to broaden its authority over foreign investments, concerns arise regarding potential legal challenges and the impact on the U.S. economy. Experts like Ling Chen from Johns Hopkins University have pointed out that Chinese investments in the U.S. have already seen a significant decline, suggesting that the anticipated economic ramifications may be limited. Nevertheless, the geopolitical landscape is shifting. Trump's foreign policy decisions, particularly his recent overtures toward Russia, have drawn criticism and raised alarms among U.S. allies. This has created a perception of instability, prompting some nations to reconsider their alliances and seek alternative partnerships, potentially with China. As former U.S. diplomat James Bindenagel noted, the erosion of trust in American leadership could lead to increased cooperation between nations such as Russia and China. Looking toward the future, the outcomes of Trump's intensified policies remain uncertain. With upcoming meetings of China's National People's Congress and the broader international response to U.S. strategies in the Asia-Pacific region still evolving, the global economic and political landscape is likely to experience further turbulence. As analysts continue to assess the fallout from these developments, it is clear that both the U.S. and China are poised at a critical juncture that could redefine their relationship and impact global trade for years to come. In a world increasingly defined by geopolitical tensions and economic shifts, The evolving relationship between the United States and China stands at a critical juncture. Following the latest measures from the Trump administration, including new tariffs and restrictions on Chinese imports, analysts are raising alarms about the potential repercussions for the U.S. economy. As President Trump seeks to recalibrate America's trading posture with China, the implications of these actions are reverberating across multiple sectors, with some experts warning of significant economic fallout. Recent research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York emphasizes that the impact of the Trump administration's tariffs may be more severe than previously understood. Hunter L. Clark, a researcher at the New York Fed, pointed out that while U.S. imports from China have reportedly decreased, the actual figures may not reflect the complete picture. U.S. imports from China have decreased by much less than has been reported in official U.S. statistics. Clark stated in a blog post highlighting a discrepancy between U.S. and Chinese data regarding trade volumes. While U.S. statistics suggest a drop in Chinese imports from 21.6% of total imports in 2018 to 13.4% in 2024, Chinese data indicates a much smaller decline. This divergence raises questions about the real impact of tariffs and the potential for greater economic strain. The situation is further complicated by potential changes to the de minimis exemption, which allows for duty-free imports valued at less than $800. Clark noted that if this exemption is eliminated, the consequences for American consumers could be profound, as a significant volume of imports falls into this category. It appears highly plausible that the U.S.'s de minimis imports from China increased by at least 50% last year, he explained, suggesting that the recent tariff increases could ultimately lead to higher prices for American consumers. As Trump intensifies his approach, his administration is not only focused on tariffs but is also considering broader economic restrictions on China. This includes potential limits on Chinese investment in the U.S. and increased scrutiny of technology transfers. Analysts such as Samm Sacks from Yale Law School have noted that the administration's recent actions indicate a desire to finish the unfinished task of fully unwinding commercial ties with China. This reflects a significant shift toward a more confrontational economic stance, potentially leading to a decoupling of the two largest economies in the world. Moreover, Trump's latest tariffs, which include a 10% levy on all Chinese imports, were justified on the grounds of national security, particularly in relation to the flow of illicit drugs into the U.S. This has provoked reciprocal measures from China, further escalating tensions between the two nations. The complexities of this trade war are underscored by the differing narratives presented by each country, with the U.S. claiming a sharp decline in imports while China insists that its exports remain robust. As the Biden administration continues some of Trump's policies, the trade landscape is fraught with uncertainty. This lack of clarity creates a challenging environment for businesses that rely heavily on trade with China. While some analysts believe that the economic repercussions may be manageable, others warn of the unintended consequences of a more aggressive stance. According to Ling Chen from Johns Hopkins University, the declining trend in Chinese investment in the U.S. since 2017 suggests that drastic changes may be unlikely. However, the potential for legal challenges and the politicization of trade policy could complicate matters further. Looking ahead, the geopolitical landscape is expected to shift further as Trump explores new partnerships, particularly with Ukraine, to secure critical minerals and resources. As discussions between the U.S. and Ukraine progress, there is potential for new supply chains that could mitigate China's dominance in certain sectors, particularly in technology and manufacturing. Analysts suggest that such developments could blunt the impact of Chinese export controls and reshape the economic dynamics between the two nations. In conclusion, the U.S.-China trade relationship is at a pivotal crossroads, with the Trump administration's tariffs and proposed restrictions marking a significant escalation in economic hostilities. The potential consequences for both economies are still unfolding, and as both nations navigate this complex terrain, the future of global trade remains uncertain. The coming months will be crucial as the world watches to see how these developments will influence not only US-China relations but also the broader landscape of international trade. In a significant development that could reshape military relations between the United States and China, Beijing has announced plans to initiate talks with the US military. This move comes amid rising tensions surrounding China's increased naval operations and its assertive stance in the South China Sea. As the world watches closely, the implications of these discussions could reverberate through diplomatic and economic channels, potentially setting the stage for a more stable relationship between the two superpowers. During a press briefing on Thursday, Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian outlined that preliminary arrangements for military exchanges are underway, while specifics remain scarce. Wu expressed optimism about the future of China-US military relations, stating, "It is hoped that China-US military-to-military relations get off to a good start and continue to grow further." This announcement coincides with President Donald Trump's return to office, a factor that might influence the dynamics of the discussions. The backdrop to these talks is a complex web of geopolitical tensions. The Trump administration's policies have intensified scrutiny on China, particularly concerning issues such as semiconductor access tariffs and investment restrictions. In response, China has adopted a measured approach, applying targeted tariffs on U.S. products while signaling its readiness to escalate measures against American companies if necessary. This tit-for-tat strategy highlights the delicate balance both nations must navigate to avoid further escalation. Wu's comments also touched on the broader context of nuclear arms control. As President Trump has expressed intentions to engage in talks regarding nuclear disarmament with both China and Russia, Wu urged the U.S. to lead by example, advocating for a reduction in its nuclear arsenal and military spending. He emphasized that China remains committed to a no-first-use policy regarding nuclear weapons, underlining its self-defensive posture. The timing of these discussions is critical. With the Chinese Navy conducting extensive military drills that have raised alarms in Taiwan, Vietnam, and neighboring countries, the need for dialogue is more pressing than ever. Recent incidents such as a Chinese Navy helicopter's dangerous maneuvers near a Philippine aircraft underscore the potential for misunderstandings that could escalate into conflict. Despite these tensions, both Beijing and Washington appear to be making concerted efforts to prevent their differences from spiraling out of control. President Trump hinted at the possibility of a trade deal with China, expressing a willingness to engage with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Such overtures suggest a recognition of the mutual benefits that can arise from a more cooperative relationship. The last known communication between high-ranking military officials from both nations occurred in September during the Biden administration, primarily focusing on operations in the South China Sea. Since then, military interactions have been limited, making the upcoming talks a potentially pivotal moment for U.S.-China relations. As the world awaits further details on these military discussions, the impact of this dialogue could extend beyond mere rhetoric. Successful negotiations could ease tensions and foster a more stable security environment in the Asia-Pacific region, while failures could lead to increased military posturing and economic confrontations. Ultimately, the outcome of these talks will be closely scrutinized, not just for their immediate effects but also for their long-term implications on global stability and security. The future of U.S.-China relations rests on the ability of both countries to navigate this complex landscape with caution and foresight.